She was barely clinging to life when they found her, her leg mangled in a rusted steel trap, fur matted with blood and icy mud. She didn't whimper or thrash, just stared at the approaching figures, men in heavy coats, armed with bolt cutters and cautious steps, her body rigid, eyes wide and unseeing, as if her spirit had already fled to some silent, distant place. At least 3 days had passed, maybe more. No scraps of food, no signs of a fight left in her. One of the rescuers muttered, "We thought about sedating her just to end the suffering." But they didn't. Instead, they pried open the trap, gently lifted her into a crate, and drove her to a wildlife sanctuary near Bozeman, Montana. They named her Aspen, not because she resembled the vibrant, quaking trees of the mountains. Not yet. She looked like a shadow of herself, fur clumped with blood, breaths shallow, ribs stark against her skin. The name was a hope, a whisper of renewal, if she could grasp it. For days, Aspen fought to flee. She threw her broken body against the steel walls of her pen, tearing open fresh stitches, ignoring the pain. The sanctuary staff watched through cameras, hesitant to approach. She refused food, ignored the safety of her enclosure, and seemed to crave only escape, even if it meant shattering what little strength she had left. She didn't snarl at the humans. Her growls were aimed at the air, at flickers of light, at her own reflection. Her eyes, though open, seemed blind to the world. Then, on the 6th day, she stopped. Aspen collapsed in the farthest corner of her pen and lay still. She wouldn't drink. She rejected medication. Flies buzzed around her muzzle, and she didn't flinch. Her breaths were faint, barely there. It wasn't just the physical wounds. Something deeper had fractured, something no bandage or medicine could mend. The staff moved quietly around her, speaking in hushed tones, steps deliberate. They saw it now. This wasn't a cougar healing. This was a creature mourning, a soul questioning if life was worth enduring. They tried everything, scents of pine, raw venison, even soft recordings of forest sounds. But nothing stirred her. Until a new crate arrived, unexpected, from Idaho. Inside was a tiny tiger cub, no more than 10 weeks old. His patchy coat marked with healing scars from burns. His eyes dim with fatigue. He didn't hiss or growl, only let out a faint, searching mew, a sound that seemed to ask for something he couldn't name. They called him Riku, a name scrawled on the papers from a raid near Boise. He'd been smuggled in a backpack, listed online as an exotic pet, found trembling in a garage, wrapped in an old towel like a discarded toy. He shouldn't have survived. Sanctuaries and zoos across the region turned him away. No space, no permits, for a non-native cat in his fragile state. Only the Bozeman Sanctuary had the medical team to take him, at least temporarily, to stabilize him. Riku's enclosure was placed across from Aspen's, not too close, just enough for safety. She noticed him first. The cameras caught it, a slight turn of her head, the first movement in days. Her ears twitched toward the soft, uncertain sound Riku made as he curled up on his heated blanket. That night, he cried again, a small, broken noise that carried through the quiet. Aspen stood, not with the frantic energy of escape, but slowly, deliberately, her shaky frame rising to face his pen. For nearly 10 minutes, she stared, unblinking. The next morning, she ate. Just a few bites of elk meat, but after days of starvation, it was enough to make the staff huddle around the monitors, stunned. Aspen's gaze stayed fixed on Riku's enclosure. The cub, too weak to wander far, hadn't seen her yet. He was focused on surviving, his tiny body curled tight. But she knew he was there. And in that cold, unfamiliar place, far from any sense of home, something flickered to life. At first, the staff doubted what they saw. They replayed the footage, watching Aspen's quiet shift, the moment she chose to eat, the way her eyes locked on the cub across the way. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Divider, his tiny paw still stretched through the slat, Aspen's response was subtle, but undeniable. The cameras caught it, a slow, deliberate shift as she pressed her flank closer to the plexiglass, her breath misting the barrier. She didn't touch his paw, didn't acknowledge it directly, but she stayed there, her body a quiet mirror to his. The staff reviewed the footage 3 times, holding their breath, afraid to name what they saw. Aspen had been so far gone, so locked in her own silence, that some had begun to murmur the unspoken fear. She's lost. Not dead, but retreated somewhere beyond reach, her spirit folded inward, shutting out the world. Yet now, she was watching. Not pacing, not fighting, just staring at the tiger cub with an intensity that wasn't anger or fear, but something unreadable. She's present, one volunteer whispered, eyes glued to the monitor. I don't know what that means, but she's here. Riku, too frail to notice her at first, was consumed with survival. His world was the warmth of his heat lamp, the bottle he drank from, the soft blanket he burrowed into as if it could replace the mother he'd lost. But 3 days later, something shifted. Riku stood, wobbling, and took tentative steps toward the edge of his enclosure. He sniffed the bars, peered through the plexiglass, and froze. There was Aspen, motionless, her eyes locked on him. Riku sat, tiny frame dwarfed by the barrier, and stared back. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Riku reached a paw through the narrow gap near the floor, not close enough to touch, just close enough to try. Aspen's ears flicked back. Her tail twitched. A low rumble started in her throat, not loud, not threatening, but uncertain. The staff tensed, but she didn't lunge or retreat. She held her ground, muscles taut, breathing shallow but steady, studying the small, striped figure like he was something entirely new. Not prey, not danger, just other. Riku yawned, a tiny, unguarded motion that made Aspen flinch, her paw lifting briefly before settling back down. The team enforced strict rules. No shared spaces, no physical contact, no risks. But they allowed the enclosures to stay side by side, monitored closely with safety panels ready. That night, Aspen didn't retreat to her corner. She slept near the divider. The next morning, when Riku pressed his nose to the seam, she growled again, sharper this time, but stayed put. No charge, no aggression, just a taut hum of tension, like a string vibrating between wariness and something undefined. She watched him all day as he napped, stretched, or rolled, his soft whimpers echoing in his sleep. Aspen stayed close. It wasn't warmth, not yet, but it was something. The staff stopped calling her hopeless. No one could fully explain the shift, but it was there in the way Riku moved with growing confidence, his wobbly steps steadier, his eyes brighter. He was still small, still underweight, but he began to play, gentle swats at his blanket, clumsy pounces on a stray leaf. Sometimes, mid-play, he'd pause and glance at the divider, as if checking if Aspen was still there. She always was. Her body had softened, no longer braced for attack. She lay near the divider, head low, ears forward, her breathing calm. The staff avoided labeling it, wary of turning it into a story too soon. But they saw it, the way Aspen's food vanished each morning, how her leg wound, still raw, no longer bled from her thrashing. Then came Riku's procedure. His burns needed fresh dressings, antibiotics, and hydration therapy. The team scheduled it in the medical bay, a short trip from his enclosure. He'd been moved before, always sedated, barely aware. This time, he was awake, alert, and vocal. As the vet lifted him into the carrier, Riku let out a sharp, piercing cry. Not pain, not fear, but a protest. Aspen surged to her feet, rushing the divider, pacing tightly, nose pressed to the seam, tail lashing. Her eyes followed him until he was gone. Then she retreated to her corner, curling into the shadows. The fragile progress, her eating, her watchfulness, seemed to unravel. She refused food that morning, turned her face to the wall, her breaths quick and shallow. Every sound in the hallway made her ears flatten, her paw twitch. It wasn't fear, it was a restless waiting, a thread of connection stretched thin. When Riku returned, groggy but stable, Aspen didn't approach it first. She watched from her corner as he was placed back on his bedding, his fur carrying the sharp scent of antiseptic. He didn't play that night, just curled up, paws tucked under, tail draped over his nose. Slowly, Aspen rose, moved forward, and lay down, not against the divider, but close. Close enough for her breath to fog the glass. She didn't look at him directly, but she didn't leave. Whatever had sparked between them hadn't vanished. It had only paused, waiting. Days passed, quiet and deliberate. Riku grew stronger, his fur thickening, the scars on his belly fading into soft stripes. He played more, livelier pounces, curious chuffs, batting at bits of straw carried by the breeze. But he always returned to the divider, pressing his small body against it, waiting. Aspen began to meet him there. At first, it was just proximity. She'd lie a few feet away, eyes half closed, not engaging but not retreating. Over time, the gap closed, slow and unforced. One morning, Riku reached through the lowest slat, paw outstretched. Aspen didn't stir. Then, she leaned in, her nose hovering just above his paw, sniffing once before settling back. Her side rested against the divider, the closest they'd come to contact. The staff watched, silent, lingering at the observation window. Riku started vocalizing, soft chuffs, gentle mews, sounds meant for a mother or sibling. Aspen listened, not responding at first, but staying near. She no longer flinched at his sudden movements or noises. Her eyes, once vacant, now followed him. When he played, she watched. When he slept, she lay close, her body curved to match his, their breaths sinking through the barrier. The volunteers whispered among themselves, cautious not to overstate it. He needs her. He thinks she's family. But it wasn't one-sided. Aspen moved more, explored her enclosure, ate steadily, and tolerated brief medical checks. The growls stopped, not at the wind, not at herself, not at the world. Rika's presence was a quiet stitch, pulling her back together, one careful loop at a time. She wasn't healed, but she wasn't hollow anymore. And Riku, small and scarred, had given her something no treatment could, a reason to stay. As Riku curled against the plexiglass, his small body rising and falling with each shallow breath, Aspen stayed. She could have moved away, retreated to her corner, but she didn't. The cameras captured it through the night. Two silhouettes, one large, one tiny, lying in mirrored stillness, separated by a barrier no paw could breach. In the morning, Rika stirred, blinking sleepily, and let out a soft, rasping chuff. It wasn't a call, but it reached her. Aspen's eyes flickered. Slowly, she rose, stretching with careful precision, each paw placed deliberately. She paced the edge of her enclosure, glancing back at him once. Riku followed from his side, mimicking her steps, clumsy but determined, as if it were a game only he understood. A volunteer's laugh broke the silence. She's showing him, they said softly. Or maybe he's teaching her how to keep going. The staff planned brief, supervised sessions. It was a gamble. Aspen was a wild cougar, Riku a fragile, non-native tiger cub with no natural tie to her. But something instinctive had shifted. The first session lasted 10 minutes, in a neutral enclosure, with escape routes for both. Aspen entered second, her body low, steps cautious. The team held their breath. She didn't lunge or flee. She walked straight. To Riku, sniffed the air above his head, and stood over him as he sat still beneath her. Then she lay down. Riku clambered onto her side, resting his chin against her ribs. No one moved. No one spoke. In that moment, it was impossible to say who needed the other more. Riku, abandoned and smuggled, had never known safety. He sought warmth like a child who knew only loss. Aspen, broken by pain and confinement, had forgotten what it meant to be needed. Her wounds were mending, but her heart had been empty. Now it beat for something, for someone. The sessions grew longer. They played in bursts. Riku chased her tail, and she let him. He burrowed under her chest, and she let him sleep there. If anyone approached too quickly, Aspen rose, standing firm, not aggressive, but present, a shield. In protecting him, she began to reclaim herself, not as prey, predator, or patient, but as something alive. Then came the morning of the mistake. A new cougar arrived overnight, young and agitated, sedation wearing off too soon. Placed in a holding pen beside the shared outdoor space, the gate between them wasn't fully secured, just loose enough for scent and sound to slip through. Riku noticed first, padding curiously along the fence, nose twitching. The new cougar spotted him and lunged, slamming the chain link with a snarl that startled the staff. Riku froze, crouching low. Aspen moved. Not a leap, but a swift rise, her fur bristling, a deep rumble vibrating in her chest. She stepped between Riku and the threat, tail lashing, ears back, her body a wall. Riku pressed against her leg. She didn't glance at him, her eyes fixed on the stranger. She didn't snarl or pace, just stood, unwavering, her message clear. You won't touch him. The staff secured the gate and moved the new cougar, but Aspen's stance lingered in their minds. A volunteer whispered. She wasn't fighting. She was guarding. She hadn't fought for herself in that trap, but for him, she did. From then on, their bond deepened. Riku grew bolder, chasing shadows, batting at sticks, always returning to her side. He began to chuff softly, sounds meant only for her. Aspen started grooming him, a hesitant lick at first, testing an old instinct, then a ritual. Every nap, every pause, ended with him curled under her jaw, her tongue smoothing his fur. They weren't just recovering animals anymore, they were a bond, unspoken but undeniable. Snow fell that week, dusting the enclosure in white, but they didn't seem to feel the cold. Each morning, Rick awoke first, stretching, chirping softly, finding Aspen always near. He'd climb onto her paws, nestling under her chin, and she'd hold still, letting him settle. Sessions extended. 10 minutes became 30, then hours. Entire afternoons passed with them together, playing, resting, or simply existing. Ricka moved with confidence when Aspen was near, running to her when startled, seeking her when tired. Aspen, once a shadow of herself, grew grounded. She groomed herself, ate steadily, and tolerated staff without fear. Her limp was no longer a wound, but a mark of survival. Their connection was clear in every shared breath, every mirrored glance. One afternoon, as Riku slept curled against her, a technician entered to adjust a heater. The soft clank woke him. Aspen stood, alert but calm, positioning herself between Riku and the door, her eyes tracking the movement. The tech retreated slowly, hands raised. Outside, someone whispered, "She's his." In the evenings, Aspen began to play, not Riku's tumbling romps, but gentle swats at a twig, nudging it toward him. He'd pounce, eyes wide with awe, always watching her. She'd become his world, and he'd filled her emptiness with purpose. Two creatures from different worlds, scarred by different pains, had found each other. Pain knows pain, and love, arriving quietly, takes root where least expected. Then came the inspection. State wildlife officials arrived unannounced, clipboards in hand, voices clipped and formal. Routine review, they said, animal conditions, documentation, protocols. Questions sharpened. Why is a cougar housed with a tiger cub? Is there a behavioral assessment for this? Are you aware this violates cross-species regulations? The staff explained, Riku's abandonment, Aspen's recovery, their bond. But the officials cared only for rules. Riku, a non-native species, was a legal gray area, held under temporary exemptions. His interaction with a native predator was a problem. We'll review this, they said. Separation may be required. The staff nodded, heart sinking. That night, Aspen and Riku were placed in separate enclosures. Riku didn't understand, crying sharp, confused chirps, pressing his paws against the divider, searching for her. Aspen paced, not frantic, but restless, pausing to stare at the empty gate. She didn't eat. The staff watched, helpless, as the light they'd nurtured flickered. They filed appeals, contacted conservation groups, and reached out to partners. A wildlife foundation, backed by a Montana-based outdoor brand, stepped in, securing Rika's transfer to a big cat sanctuary in Wyoming, equipped for exotic species rescued from illegal trade. He'd have care, space, safety, but not Aspen. The news landed heavily. The night before his transfer, they were allowed one final moment together. No barriers, no staff. Riku ran to her, pressing into her chest, chirping softly. Aspen curled around him, grooming his head, his back, her tongue steady and gentle. They stayed like that, silent, heartbeats aligned. Morning came. The transport crate waited, lined with warm blankets. Riku sniffed it curiously, unafraid, looking for Aspen. The staff debated a final meeting. Some said it would hurt more, others knew it was needed. When they opened Aspen's gate, she didn't rush. She waited. Riku bounded to her, nuzzling her chest. She wrapped around him, chin resting on his back, eyes closed. 5 minutes stretched to 15. The vet whispered Rika's name, an apology. He looked to Aspen, as if for permission, but she only held him a moment longer before letting go. Lifted into the crate, Riku stared at her through the slats, still and silent. Aspen pressed her nose to the edge, one breath, then he was gone. The van rolled away, tires crunching on icy gravel. Aspen stood at the gate for hours, not pacing, not crying, just watching. When night fell, she turned away. Her posture was heavier, but not empty. She hadn't been abandoned. She'd been needed, chosen, loved. Her eyes no longer looked through the world, but into it. Aspen was released into a protected stretch of Montana wilderness. Her limp slight, but her stride purposeful. Rika lives in Wyoming sanctuary, safe among other survivors, still chirping into the quiet, still curling tight when he sleeps. Their bond, though brief, was a rescue, not just of bodies, but of hearts. In Rika's small cries, Aspen found a reason to live. In her steady presence, he found safety. Healing isn't always freedom. Sometimes it's a moment, a connection, a silent promise. Their story shows why rescue matters, why compassion, responsibility, and conservation can mend what pain has broken. Share their journey to help more animals find the care they deserve.